Welcome to Start Making. This is my workbench, and on its own, it's a really good workbench that I'm proud of. But I'm hoping that after showing you all of the accessories, all of the internals of this table, you're going to agree with me that this might just be the ultimate hybrid workbench. There's going to be hold downs, clamps, T-tracks, dovetail, storage, a battery, dust extraction, more drawers, cubby holes, shelves, and the ultimate accessory that means you can do hand tool woodworking without wrecking your bench. So let's start with the underneath. Under here is a battery. Under here is my router table. Under here are some drawers, and if you're going to use push drawer runners, know that you'll always have to open that drawer with two hands rather than one, and it'll drive you nuts even in the first week of using it. And now for a couple of things you haven't seen. Battery's down here. Next to it, I had a space, 330mm across, 330mm back, and I was just putting junk in it. So I made some drawers. Did I make nice drawers? Oh no, I just threw together some scrap wood and put it into place. But they do a fantastic job of maximising the space and keeping dust off things that shouldn't have dust on them. And importantly, things that need to be close to the workbench. Let me show you. Now, I think the thing you notice straight away with these drawers is no handles. That is just me. I haven't got around to putting handles on them. Yes, it's already driving me bananas, but they're a really simple design. It's the same design I use for my shop drawers, which have worked perfectly for a year now. No problems, no breakages. The reason I love it so much is because it's cheap. You don't need to have any drawer runners or expensive parts that go with it. It's just plywood, and in this case, scrap pieces of OSB. All I've done is just make a frame, which is just two sides and a top, and then a piece at the bottom that's just going to hold them sturdy. There's a piece of wood at the back that attaches to the internal dividers within the workbench, so it's rigid. Then I've cut some strips, and I've just set them apart by the width of a piece of ply, plus a couple of mil for movement. The drawer itself is just a box. The base is the runner, and the sides attached to the front. If you want to put a prettier front on and not screw straight through from the front, go for it. These just slide in straight between the drawer runners and sit in there nicely. With some handles, well, these would be much better. There's another little secret cubby next to them with something that I think is so dangerously simple, you are going to love it. I'll show you that in a second, but first, right next to these, you remember I've got the battery. Well, because I'm going to try and run the whole workbench off the battery and see if this battery is going to power a whole shed for some of you guys, I've just put my battery charger on the side of these drawers for maximum use of space. It's just a French cleat. And then next to it, you've got a little bit of storage to put some of the gubbins for the battery. Now, the dangerously clever bit that, yeah, well, it is so simple. I've got a random little gap between two of the legs, and the space isn't really big enough to put anything in apart from, these are just scribble boards. It's just a whiteboard that you can write on whatever you want. And then once you've finished writing it, well, you can stop writing it, rub it off, and then do the next thing. What they're actually really super handy for is if you've got a cut list, like when I was making these drawers, and you just want to scribble it down while you're measuring out, do that, take it to the table saw, cut your piece of wood, rub the ink away, and then put it back under your table. Saving on notebooks, and you're not giving yourself the opportunity to forget or misremember the dimensions. One thing that a bench made out of 2x4s and ply tends to get is quite a lot of recesses. Because you board the inside, you tend to get the width of a 2x4 recessed in. They make great little cubbies to keep really important things around the workbench, like grab shelves if you like. In this one, well, that's where I've got my brackets that hold up the wing, which we're going to swing back around to in a minute. And also, most importantly, the first aid kit. Now, mine's dusty. That's a great sign within a workshop. The less you have to reach for that, the better. And let me show you what I've done on the other side. On this side, I've managed to get two shelves in one. And to make the shelves, all you need is to cut a strip of 1/4" ply, another strip for the underside, screw through and hold it braced on the 2x4s. To be honest, I have not screwed it into the back because nothing in there is going to add enough weight that it's going to tip through the bottom and rip out 4 screws. And the last place for shelves is probably the hardest place to film right now, but that's right at the back here. This is where I stand to talk to you guys most of the time. It's also where I tend to stand to do most of my making. So having some of those tools that you grab for every task, well, that's the place to keep them. these sanding pads come out every single time. I'm forever making notes, so I need my notebooks. Speed square, plenty of room for other stuff. Didn't want to fill it just for the sake of it. And I've got this. This magnet strip is just for when I want to bring tools over to the table, use them for a specific job, so I can keep them close to hand, use them, put them back, and then when I finish, clear them away finally. So that's the big cubbies and the shelves covered. There's one area that I haven't shown you beneath the bench, and that's the dust extraction for the table saw. I'm really proud of that, and I'm going to swing back round to that in a second. But first, I want to just talk to you about the wings and what we can do on the side of this table, which is really exciting for me. As a woodworker, the first thing you'll notice when you look at this table is no vise. I left it so that I can fit one after the fact, and I'm not set on not having one. But I do have the Moxon vise, which I can put on and take off as and when I need to. And I believe with enough hold downs, you can get the job done using a few of the accessories that come with them. One of those is T-Track. T-Track comes in different shapes and sizes. It's not one size fits all. Different hold downs and different T-Track accessories fit certain ones. So for instance, when I fitted this one into the wings and realised that not one of my accessories worked in it, had to switch it all out for this stuff. And it's not cheap. So I've done two methods of hold downs. One is free in effect and one is with T-Track. And I'm going to show you the different ways that I use them. I talked about these wings in the build video. And I said at the time they're going to stay on the side for 95% of my use of this bench. Got T-Track on the side here. I've then put in a dovetail slot underneath and I've got dog holes on the sides. Each one works very differently. However, the overall job is to hold a piece of work sturdy against the side. So let's talk T-Track first. The accessories that I've got for the T-Track for this side are these. They're just clamps. You slide them in, run them across to where they're needed. And this is where, if you've got two joining wings like mine, leaving a handy little gap of about an inch means you can slide in from both sides. Once they're tightened, that board is firmly in place. Now, I confess, these I bought very cheaply, and I'll run through a few prices as we go, because I decided while I'm testing, the cheaper the better. Then when I decide what I really like to use, that's when I'll invest in something more expensive. These are all off AliExpress and they cost somewhere in the region of a tenner each. What I've noticed with this is it's really hard with these screw downs to get it perfectly tight. It feels very stable up and down, not so much if you're twisting it. So it depends what job you're doing. Dovetail slot can be a little bit daunting. You think you've got to run a router over it twice potentially if you're using a trim router like I did. But I'm going to show you on another piece for this workbench how easy it actually is. Once you've routed it in, all you've got to do is slide in these match fit clamps, which fit nicely in the dovetail slot, and attach a piece with them. They work in the same way as your regular F-style clamps. They clamp down on the work and you twist, which then puts pressure against the dovetail slot and holds the board in place. Now the difference between these and the T-Track clamps is, these aren't going anywhere. And the beauty of them is, this is free. You can cut this in as many times as you want, and I may just do that because these knock the spots off all of the other clamps that I've tested. There is one other really cool thing that I've got that goes on these. It'll probably be on there whenever I'm not using a clamp. First one, a French cleat that fits into T-Track. Now remember please, these aren't pretty because these are prototypes if you like. This one lives down by my table saw and that's for my bin. I'll show you that in a sec. The next one is made in exactly the same way. And when I say made in the same way, I mean it is literally a French cleat with two holes in it and then T-Track bolts going through it. And then for any tools that you bring to the workbench, why not have a magnet strip that clips there as well? It's all removable, it's all flexible, you move it from one place to the other, and let me show you what you can do. You're doing a little bit of dovetailing? Well, you're going to need a couple of chisels, and you're going to need your dovetail saw, and you might need a combination square. It's all there. Grab it, use it, put it back. I think that might be one of the top 3 additions to this workbench. Or just skip all of that, bring over your everyday tool shelf, and put it on the French cleat. Now this you'll have seen if you watch my French cleat video. Why not have all of your tools in one place, grab them, use them, put them all back. This is my everyday tools holder. It's not pretty, it's incredibly functional. And then, as everybody always sees me do, there's the bin. I say it all the time on all of these videos, practicality. The last bit on this side that I want to show you is this addition to the legs. All I've done is drill some 20mm holes because that's the dog hole size that I've gone for, and I've spaced them a couple of inches apart. This is my version of a dead man, and this is basically if you have larger pieces of wood and you want to clamp them, this supports them down below. So you lock in your dogs, balance the piece of wood on them. It's not quite the right size for this job, but you'll see what I mean. It supports it down below, and you can work on it above without the worry of it slipping down and up, and it helps you just get it clamped up as well. Before we get onto the tabletop, there's one last cubby that I wanted to show you, and that is here. This is directly behind the table saw, and it's my attempt at putting a cyclone separator dust extraction inside the bench. Full disclaimer, it's not my idea. And the fact that it's not my idea is why I'm not going to show you the build. I saw this on Instagram. A German fella whose channel is Frank Shed. I'll put a link down in the description. I will show you what I've done though, because I do think it's quite clever. What I wanted was to be able to completely disconnect the table from the dust extraction as and when I wasn't using the table saw. So I can move it around so I'm not tripping over the hose. Same reason that I'm running the battery inside. I don't want cables going to and from. What I've done, this is the main port. It's 100mm, and that is where you connect in whatever shop vac you have with its 100mm hose. Once that's inside, it goes down to the smaller hose, which is around 50mm, and that goes straight into the top of the Dust Commander Cyclone. Then it comes out the other side of the Cyclone and goes straight into the table saw, where it sucks up all the dust. What's clever is instead of having the barrel underneath it like you normally would, this is sat upon a box, and inside the box, well, that's a drawer. The idea with any cyclone separator is to separate out any of the dust and debris before it goes back to your vacuum. What you end up with inside this drawer is a big old pile of sawdust. I haven't completely finished this yet. This needs to be siliconed on the inside, and I need some better seals around the edge of the box itself, because the more airtight you can get this, the more suck goes through there and gets to the table saw. One thing I did realise is, different to Frank's shed, I've got a much bigger drawer. I thought that would be smart. It's not. How can I fit that drawer into a bin bag to get rid of the dust that's in here when it gets full? I've had another idea. Inside this box, I've put another box. This one is a plastic sealable box. So once this is full of all the dust and debris, as you can see there from cutting the drawers that I did last night, seal it up, take it outside, get rid of it into your bin bag, and then put it back in ready for your next set of cuts. Now let's get onto the top of the workbench. This is what sees all the action. Now one of the things I'm going to be using this for, and one of the reasons I picked this laminate instead of just a plywood top, is I'm going to do a lot of glue ups. I'm not going to cover it because this scrapes the glue off, and it does a really good job of it, but it doesn't do the best job. This is a very simple steel 30cm ruler. This is the best way to scrape glue off your table. You just run it gently over the top and it takes away all of the glue. And so long as you've got a slight overhang on your workbench, there's a lot of times that all you need to do is clamp the piece you're going to be working on straight down to the workbench with a couple of squeeze clamps. I want to say, before we get lost in all of the details of these expensive hold downs, a simple piece of 1/4" ply clamped to the edge of your workbench makes the perfect planing stop. No problem at all. I'm just going to show you some alternatives. I wanted a few different things on this table, and I've shown you some of them, and I've shown you them in use. But the coolest thing that I was most interested in getting was pop-up bench dogs. These don't need to be complicated. I first saw them on Keith Brown's channel, Rag and Bone Brown, and he made them fairly similar to what I've done. He made them a lot nicer, but basically they work with 2 fixtures. These are for push cupboards. The black one is perfectly cylindrical, So all you need to do is get a piece of wood, drill a hole in it and slide this in. Not only is it cylindrical, it's also got these little veins on the side, so you don't even need to glue it. The grey one is a D shape, and that's a problem. Because if you've done 20mm holes and you want to chisel in this D shape, there's not a lot of meat to work with. And I found that the wood was splitting almost every time, which is a shame because the grey ones pop up further than the black one. One of the reasons I wanted pop-up bench dogs is because these holes, once you've drilled them, fill up with sawdust. To drill them, well, that's easy. All you have to do is mark out where you want them spaced on the table. Think about how you're going to be woodworking and how many you need, which is why I've just done it round this near side for now. Know that you can always add more, and then focus on what depth you can get. I've got 2 sheets of ply, and I've done shallower holes where there's no support, deeper holes for the pop-up bench dogs where there's a 2x4 underneath it that I can nick a little bit of extra depth out. There's 2 ways of doing the holes. First one would be to get a plastic grid that you can buy off many of the shops online that you can use with your router and a plunge base and a guide bushing. That way you're going to get perfectly straight down holes. Or like me, bust out a 20mm fours and a bit and just go to town. It does come with a warning. Do you know where all the screws are that you put into your workbench? I didn't, and I am 1 fours and a bit down. But once you've got all your holes drilled, well, that's where the fun starts, because as well as the pop-up bench dogs, there's many other things that you can buy to support your holding of work on the table. The first 2 work with a bench dog. So you put your bench dog in, and then you clamp your piece of wood between the bench dog and the clamp. You can move this clamp in and out just by turning the screw, getting it further away from the piece or closer to it. You can move your bench dog down the holes if you've got a wider board, and then once you're happy with the positioning, you tighten up the screw. It does have a couple of flaws. Because you tighten it with this lever here, once it's along the ground, you tend to not get a huge amount of clearance. And the same can be said with the ratchet spanner. You just don't have a huge amount of clearance beneath the actual movements. And there is one final flaw. Inside the head, bearing in mind you're twisting this to tighten it and loosen it, the head, once it's pressed against your work, stays still and is held on by a bolt with a thread. This comes loose a lot. Price-wise, the ratchet clamp was about £9. The red clamps came in at around £5. What you also have to bear in mind is you need to buy a set of bench dogs that fit the right holes that you've drilled. These particular ones came for £4 for £6. As I said, while I'm testing, I'm happy buying the cheap stuff. But once I've found what I like and I know what I need, I want to buy something a little bit nicer and I want to support a local UK business. So I went shopping on benchdogs.co.uk and got these and some other stuff. And these are really nice quality. They seem to fit in the holes a little bit nicer and they're much easier and more tactile to use than these silver ones. However, they do come at a little bit more of a price, but once you've got them, you're buying into the Bench Dogs range. I am not an affiliate and I'm not sponsored by them. At this stage, I paid £13 for those 2. This was £10 and I bought 2 of them, and you need a slightly deeper hole or a thicker board for this to work. What you do, with that lever flat, you push it down onto your work and then you use the cam action just to pull it upright to hold your piece to the table. Now this is surprisingly solid. If you just want to lock a piece of wood down very quickly to do a little bit of work on it, this will do it. But we've made some holes, and with holes come problems because these holes are going to fill up with sawdust. My first thought was make some wooden plugs, and they work okay. I drilled a hole in them, I filled it with hot glue, and I pushed a couple of magnets in. You can pull them out with a magnet, put them back in. Here's the problem. If you're working with a metal tool on your workbench and you just leave it lying around, you're gonna take your bench dog hole covers with you. And that's a problem. But it is by far the best priced way of doing this. But there's another solution if you're willing to pay a little bit more. Because Bench Dog UK do these cool covers. All you need to do is put a chamfer around each one of your holes, slide one of these bench dog caps in, sits just below the surface. You'll never drop anything else in these holes again. And magnet removes it. What makes them doubly cool is that they send you them in this cool little tin. Now, I don't need to store these in there, but what I do need to store in is the last thing I bought from them, which are these bench dogs with a little rubber cover on them, which stop things sliding around. Pop these protectors in, they just sit on the surface with the rubber upwards. You could use this for anything that you're going to be sanding. Just pop it down on top, it stops it moving around. Me, I had a bit of spare laminate, so I've got this slid under my workbench. This is if I don't want the holes and I want a nice even surface to work on. Basically a spare board that sits underneath my workbench. And once you're finished, it just slides nicely away under the workbench. Now, anybody that knows me well knows that I am a half hand tool, half power tool hybrid woodworker. And that is why I've always called this the hybrid workbench. But I tell you now, I am not going to be taking a hammer and chisel to this. And that's only because I know full well that I'm also a clumsy woodworker and I'd put the chisel straight through the top. So the last accessory that I made for this workbench is a hand tool worker's butcher's block. This is just made out of pallet wood that I sent through the table saw when I was testing out the dust extraction. I then laminated it all together to make this huge block. And here's the beauty, it's double-sided. I like having it along the length so I can pop up all of these bench dogs and then I can use a couple of my other clamps just to push it up against them. And in fact, really all it's taken there is just one ratchet clamp, one clamp, and that entire board is held in place. I took the time to route out grooves on the top here for more dovetail clamps. What you need to do is get it into position, lock it down, and you can go about your hand tooling. You don't have to hold it down in the same way because you've got them going in the length as well. So if you're doing something on the middle of that, it's absolutely rock solid while you work on it. So this side right here is going to be mainly for intricate woodworking. But the other thing that I'm lacking with this workbench is mistake areas. And by that, I mean areas where you can just drill through something without worrying about where the drill bit ends up on the other side. Well, that's where this side comes in. This is the spoil side. It's perfectly flat, well, flat enough, but this is what I'm going to be cutting on, drilling into, making a mess of. Once I made a mess of it, I just plane a couple of mil off it and we start again. And the biggest bonus is it's pallet wood. Eventually, it'll get exchanged for a new one and all it's cost me is a bit of hard work. And that makes this a hybrid workbench. One thing I've got to say is that out of everything I bought to test, these were not something I'd class as cheap, but they are very high quality and they are perfect for the job. So I went straight in for them. As with everything, I'll leave a link in the description where you can have a look at these and see if they're going to work for you. And so this is the end of the hybrid workbench build. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you missed the actual bench build itself, it's up there. If you've enjoyed this, first time to the channel and you're looking for something else to watch, check out this one. And as usual, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you over there.